how legal can it be an F1 car that makes George Russell, one of the most methodical pilots of the grill, release a phrase as direct as, "He will not tell you that they are close to being illegal"? What Russell had seen since his Mercedes did not fit his understanding of competitive balance. In the last sector of Hungaroring, a section composed exclusively of a half and low-speed curves, Russell noticed something unusual. Leclerc was not only faster that can go through talent, it was systematically faster in a stretch where the limit does not mark the engine or DRS, but the efficiency of the car platform and the behavior of the chassis in constant lateral load areas. Russell, as a pilot with deep technical knowledge, detected that it was not a simple pilot-style difference. He tried to replicate the Leclerc layout in the following laps, adjusting the braking point, the opening of the steering wheel, and even modifying the management of the differential from the steering wheel. The result was clear. His car simply could not follow that rhythm without compromising stability. The disconcerting is that this difference did not occur in a single round or under exceptional conditions. It was repeated, constant, telemetry after telemetry. Leclerc was doing things that no other car seemed to replicate, not even the Red Bull at their best. This generated a murmur that extended as a gunpowder in the engineers. SF-25 data showed an out-of-curve traction capacity that seemed to challenge logic. The sensors revealed a millimeterly controlled weight transfer, a stability that allowed Leclerc to apply power before usual without breaking traction or generating survival. At first glance, the car seemed glued to the ground, a common expression in F1 that rarely has a solid scientific base. But in this case it seemed to be real. The SF-25 achieved a step by fluid curve, without the slightest gesture of rear instability. And this, in Hungary, means pure gold. Some began to speak quietly of a possible gray zone in the legality of the rear suspension system. Ferrari had already surprised at the pre-season for its innovative hydraulic double bond design, a system that, although within the regulation, could be interpreted as a dynamic adjustment mechanism of the rake of the car. If this was confirmed, we would be facing a piece that transforms aerodynamic behavior without technically inactive suspension, which would explain how Leclerc could maintain the ideal height of the car even in linked curves, maximizing the soil effect without suffering rebound. To this is added the optimized use of the third element in the front suspension, which could be functioning as a platform stabilizer. The set would allow the SF-25 to maintain the flat background at a constant distance from the asphalt, even under high lateral G-forces. This technical detail, almost impossible to verify in real time, would completely change the dynamics of the car in sectors such as the last of Hungaroring. What Russell hinted was not just frustration. It was an alert. A warning that something in Ferrari did not square with what the rest of the teams could achieve. It was not a direct accusation, but in a sport where the millimeter advantage is everything, and where innovations always walk on the thin line of legality, those words can be the spark that ignites a technical scandal of major proportions. Because in Formula One, when a pilot like Russell begins to doubt publicly, it is not by chance. It is because their engineers are already looking at the data, and those data do not lie. For years, Ferrari has loaded with a reputation of being bright in peak speed but weak in stability. Since the era of hybrids, one of its great Achilles heels has been the control of the platform in technical curves. But this season, that narrative has turned completely. Leclerc's car is capable of keeping the plane background almost motionless, even when the car supports extreme lateral forces. This capacity transforms yield into curve, especially in sectors where the key is the fast step without compromising traction. How is Ferrari achieving it? According to several paddock sources, the secret could be in a rear suspension system designed with a hybrid philosophy. It is not a prohibited active suspension for years, but a concept that mimics its effects using a complex architecture based on a multibrazzo system with a third element that works in conjunction with double-circuit hydraulic shock absorbers. This system would allow the distance to the ground constant, even when the car changes from direction quickly or when the aerodynamic load varies due to the rear spoiler. In addition, something unusual has been detected in the way the Ferrari manages vertical load peaks. When most cars suffer from compressions that cause rebounds or loss of traction, especially in braking or aggressive acceleration, SF-25 behaves as if it had a kind of invisible mattress that absorbs those forces. This generates a feeling of car on rails that not only favors Leclerc from the physical, but also increases his confidence after return. The key, according to technical analysts, can be in the dynamics of pitch and roll. In simple words, Ferrari would have found a system that partially decoupling the vertical movement of the car with respect to the longitudinal and transverse movement. While other cars tend to lean in braking or lift the back when accelerating, the Ferrari maintains its neutral platform. And that has brutal implications in aerodynamic performance. The soil effect is optimized, the rear wing is not destabilized, and the air flow on the diffuser remains clean, even in compromised conditions. In summary, Leclerc Ferrari feels like an active suspension car, but technically it is not. The practical result is that Charles Leclerc can anticipate more aggressive braking points, keep the car attached to the vertex of the curve without survival risk, and apply the accelerator with greater freedom than its rivals. This advantage is not only invisible to the naked eye, it is also difficult to challenge, since the standard FIA sensors are not designed to detect this type of complex passive intervention. The car behaves within the regulatory limits, but at the most filicided edge. And this is where true concern enters. If Ferrari has managed to camouflage this system within the legality, without activating alerts in the post-carrier inspections, we would not only be facing a technical genius, but before a serious threat to the rest of the grille. Because no other team has been able to replicate this level of dynamic behavior so far. Mercedes tries with mechanical adjustments, Red Bull experiments with aggressive configurations, and McLaren has opted for a more conventional platform. But none has reached that point of total equilibrium between chassis and aerodynamics that the SF-25 is demonstrating. So the question is no longer whether Ferrari has an advantage. The question is that advantage within the spirit of the regulation? Because in Formula One, the letter of the law allows to innovate. But the spirit, that is always a reason for debate. And when a pilot like George Russell begins to launch indirects, he does it because his engineers have already seen something in the data that does not fit. And if that is confirmed, we could be before the next great technical case of the modern F1. In a Formula One where the margin between innovation and illegality can be as thin as a carbon sheet, one would expect the regulatory body to act firmly and precisely before any indication of technical irregularity. But what happens in 2025 with Ferrari raises an uncomfortable question. Where is the FIA while the rivals observe with suspicion the performance of Charles Leclerc? The historical context reminds us that FIA has been relentless in the past when an innovation questions sports. It is enough to remember what happened with the Ferrari engine in 2019, when a silent investigation and no details concluded with a confidential agreement between the FIA and the Scuderia after suspicions about the legality of its power unit. Since then, the perception that some technical areas escaped the immediate scrutiny of the regulatory entity has been strengthened among the teams. In 2025, FIA operates under a technical regulation that is extensive, but also interpretive. Many sections of the regulation, especially those that cover suspensions, flexible aerodynamics and energy management, are written with open language to allow innovation. This approach encourages creativity, yes, but also gives rise to legal lagoons. And Ferrari seems to have exploited one of them with surgical precision. Unlike systems such as Mercedes DS in 2020 that was initially approved but then prohibited by regulatory change, or the flexible rear wing of Red Bull that was restricted with more severe flexion test, which Ferrari could be using in its SF-25, does not require visible mobile components or obvious structural alterations. It is an internal solution, possibly integrated in the hydraulic system or in the suspension architecture, which makes its detection extremely difficult without an aggressive and specific technical inspection. And here is the real dilemma. For the FIA to investigate, a formal protest of a rival team, or a suspicion founded during post-carrier reviews is required. But at this point of the season, no team has presented an official protest against Ferrari. Because the answer is tactical. Publicly accusing another team without forceful evidence can damage relationships, divert resources, and in case of error, leave those who protest exposed to technical and media ridiculous. Russell did not speak to speak. He knew that by insinuating an illegality, he was launching an alert that would force rival engineers to investigate. But the FIA until now remains on the sidelines. And if no one acts, we run the risk of repeating past scenarios where a technical innovation was allowed to define half championship before being prohibited. The silence of the FIA not only keeps suspicion alive, but also question its arbitration capacity in an era where technology advances faster than regulation. Because if Russell is right and all track signs suggest that at least it has reasons to doubt, then we would not be facing a simple technical innovation, but against a regulatory disruption with the potential to unbalance the 2025 championship from its foundations. A hidden system. An imperceptible advantage to the human eye. A difference that is only captured when you compare telemetry against telemetry and you see that what Charles Leclerc does should not be possible without mechanical or invisible aerodynamic assistance. In both scenarios, the impact is deep. Because if the Leclerc car earns races or struggle for the championship with an advantage that others cannot replicate, the focus will not be only in their talent, but in what that car allows. 2025 can be remembered as the year of Ferrari's return to the elite, or as the year in which the gray areas of the regulation define the title.